Hey, Jason Fladlin here. And this prosperity algorithm training today that I want to break down for you starts with the definition. What is an algorithm? And if you had to think, what is an algorithm exactly? What would your response to that be? From a technical aspect, it's kind of a computational array of different information used to crunch and make decisions. So when you type into Google a search, it gives you results based on order of relevance. When you go to Apple to look for music, what you input gives you a result based on what they think you're looking for. Some other algorithms are more automated, like YouTube just tells you watch these videos because we think you'll like them. Facebook says read this stuff on your news feed because we think you will, so they make the decisions for you. All of those things are algorithms. Essentially, it's a finite amount of a small few inputs that determine a result and can be run automatically. So that's what an algorithm is. And my algorithm background is pretty phenomenal. If I can toot my own home for a minute, if that's okay with you, is to me, when I wanted to be a master at this technology we're on right now, webinars, I said, what's the algorithm to be successful in webinars? And I cracked it up to the very, very top. The platform Zoom, which is now a $100 billion plus company, depending on where their stock lands, publicly traded company. A couple months before they went public, they brought me in to train their webinar users on how to do webinars. And so that was where the mastery of the webinar algorithm led me to. And that's one aspect of business. Another aspect of business is Amazon, the small little online store you may have heard of. I'm joking with you, of course. Amazon controls 25% of the money that passes through the internet. And we were able to figure out the Amazon search results. What happens when somebody types in Bluetooth speaker, who shows up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and so on and so forth. And so we were able to be very successful on Amazon and then teach others how to do that as well. And we took this algorithmic attitude and approach to that. When I say we, I mean the team here at Rapid Crush, which is a company that I co-founded with Will Matos and with this wonderful, amazing staff that we have. And as a business, as a force, we also figured out the affiliate game. Because online, you might not know this, but there's all sorts of programs that you can refer people to that if they buy through your referral, you get like half the money. And we're considered the best in the world, Rapid Crush, in promoting as an affiliate. And to us, we approach this with an algorithm. And so all of these are really kind of secondary algorithms to me, because I think prosperity sits above all of those things. Not just to have abundance in business or in one facet of your life, but for prosperity algorithm, it's to have an abundance of abundances. So I don't know how that sounds to you. If that sounds good to you, let me know about that. The journey to create the prosperity algorithm first began unbeknownst to me in 2007, where I was in this little couple 100 square foot shed turned apartment. And half of it was a living room, bedroom / office. And that was where I worked out of. I couldn't put a bed in there and a desk. So I chose to have a desk and slept on the floor instead. But that's where the algorithm started. And then a few years after that, when I hunkered in and did the work, I became a cash millionaire and then a multimillionaire not too long after that. And along the way, it was about a 14-year journey when I finally said, you know what? Let me sit down and make a formal study and a science to this. And then let me see what I came up with. So I came up with the 10 factors that I think contribute most greatly to prosperity. So this is the algorithm of prosperity. And of course, we put it into a course. And at any point in time during this webinar, you have the URL here on your screen. Just go ahead and write that down, type it in if you want to go. I have arranged a special webinar only pricing for you, just so you know when we do sell this thing retail, it's about $1,000, and a fair trade, might I add, for abundance and prosperity and a wealth of wealths. But essentially, I drilled it down to 10 major components of prosperity. And we're going to dive into most of those here today as a preview. And then hopefully, if you like the preview, and I promise you, whether you invest or not, your time is going to be well spent here today. But if you really like what I have for free, maybe you want to invest to take it to the next level. Now, why prosperity algorithm? I kind of hinted at this earlier, is wealth is better than money. So money's great. Most people struggle with getting over the money challenge in their life, having to resolve themselves to doing things to get by. So spending a majority of their life working in an occupation or a job to pay the bills, which is better than not paying the bills. And for some of us, that's as far as we can get. So money's important, but above money is wealth. And so wealth is more than just money. Wealth represents an abundance beyond just one facet, such as finance. And so prosperity, to me, in my definition, is an abundance of abundances, where everything in your life is just as wonderful it could possibly be, without compromises and setbacks in other areas. Because a lot of us, where we've been taught this give and take. Well, if I want to have this, I must sacrifice that. And I don't necessarily think that's the best way to prosperity, but you'll see what I'm getting at here. When I sat down to come up with the prosperity algorithm, I first wrote down thousands of concepts and ideas, phrases, whatever came to my mind. I just stared at a blank page, and if it seemed to like channel through the universe to me, I put it on paper. From that, I whittled it down to 63. I think maybe one or two of these is a duplicate. I didn't really censor myself. And I said, of these 63, if I really had to prune it down to its essence, what would it look like? And this is what I came up with. So no joke, hundreds of hours of thought have been put into each one of these concepts. So the prosperous purpose is one element. The structure of freedom is another one. Adaptivity and flexibility, tenacious persistence, the virtues of adversity, strategic leverage, wonderful unfairness, serendipity, and luck, marketing expertise, marketable expertise, I should say, and perfect imperfection. And I think this is the essence of prosperity. And so I said, you know what, let's deep dive into each one of these. And I created the best lesson plan that I could for each one of these 10 elements. And I want to give you some of the best of the best. And I think we're going to get to 8 of these here today, where I'm going to just show you what I found in my findings, the Cliff Notes version of it, the most essence that I can punch and pack to briefly, in about an hour's time, maybe less, cover these elements with you. So let's start with the most important one, the first one. The element of all elements, the prosperous purpose. And there's a saying that really hit me the first time I heard it, by Elena Ferrante, that says, the circle of an empty day is brutal, and at night it tightens around your neck like a noose. The empty day. And a lack of purpose is an empty day. And it breaks my heart. And I've lived a lot of my life having empty days before I found purpose. And without purpose, it doesn't seem like anything else can happen. And with purpose, it seems like everything else is possible. But this is what's at stake here. If we don't really get into purpose, the circle of an empty day is brutal. And at night, it tightens around your neck like a noose. And so if you've had empty days, or if you feel your days are empty right now, I empathize with you. But it doesn't have to be that way forever. And if we can put just a little bit into the empty day, what could that do for you? It could turn a lot of things around. But we want to acknowledge what is in front of us first. So if we're not in purpose, let's get in purpose. In fact, your first purpose is to uncover your purpose. Here's what's very interesting about purpose. Simply seeking purpose is in itself sufficient at first for your purpose. Man's purpose is to discover his purpose. So that's where we start, right? Woman's purpose is to discover her purpose. Whatever gender you identify with or don't identify with, it doesn't matter to me. If you're not in purpose, you're out of purpose. Let's find your purpose. But more important than finding it, let's uncover it, because finding it presupposes you have to go look for it. But I'm telling you, it's already inside you. So let's uncover it. So step number 1 is to uncover that purpose. And step number 2 is, when you have that purpose, you put your heart and your soul into it, my friend. So here's a little thought exercise for you. If I could put 1 or 2 or 3 words and put them on your heart, imprint them on your heart, what would those 3 words be? That's a clue to purpose. If you say to yourself, what is something I had in my head and in my heart when I was 6? And here I am at 60, or whatever age I may find myself in currently, and I still can't let it go. Even though I've grown up, it's still there with me. That's a hint. That's a clue. That's purpose. Ultimately, what we strive for when we try to become harmonious with purpose is authenticity. So if we're not in purpose, we're inauthentic. And there's pain. This is not a judgment, by the way. This is just calling it what it is. I don't look down on anybody who is living a quote unquote inauthentic life, because we all can struggle with authenticity from time to time. But the pain of inauthenticity, that's what we want to really have to get a handle on or get some leverage on. And like, what comes to my mind here, because inauthenticity to me is not living in purpose. When you're living out of purpose, you're uneasy or you're diseased or diseased, right? The prosperity of purpose. A healthy person has 1,000 wishes, a sick person has one. And so I'm quite literally telling you that when you're not at ease, you're at dis-ease, and dis-ease will create disease. In fact, many studies have been done that those who have purpose, and the way that scientists try to measure it, and there's all kinds of different parameters you can structure and set this up with, but the findings are consistent. However, they decide to set out to measure what purpose is. Every time they do these studies, they discover things like, hey, people that live in purpose have a decreased risk of heart attack. And heart disease is one of the biggest killers in the modern world. They also are at a decreased risk of stroke. My father had a stroke that devastated him. And it was heartbreaking to watch the toughest, strongest man I know be reduced to next to nothing. And it's like, oh my God, if I could do anything to limit some of that from maybe happening to me, I'd say sign me up. And purpose seems to, for people, amongst heart issues, also brain issues with the stroke as well. Point being, you live longer because you have something to live for. And that's not just an anecdotal kind of concept. That is clinically measured and studied and proven in the science as well as in the art, that with purpose, you live longer. And I like to think about it like this, because without purpose, you're basically telling the universe you're not worth taking seriously. You are committing an offense to the universe. Maybe it's not that hardcore. I don't know. I think it's that hardcore personally, and I'll still love you nonetheless, regardless of how you reconcile these things. But the way I look at it is if I don't live in my purpose, I'm telling the universe that it's not worth it for me to try. And so I'm not expecting too much in return because I'm not giving too much either. Does that make sense to you? And this is not kindergarten stuff. This is not get by stuff. This is high level prosperous stuff, right? And if we had to really wrap it up and put it on a bumper sticker, it looks like this. It's hard to start living your life until you first choose the life that you want to live. And I will tell you this, my friend, you can choose. Yes, there have been challenges in your way. And yes, maybe you didn't start where other people started. Maybe you had disadvantages that other people didn't have. Maybe you've had trauma that's unfathomable to most people that I couldn't even begin to understand and relate to, nor could anybody else. You can still choose. No matter what. You can still choose. There are many things that you don't have choice over, or many things that are out of your control or have limited control over, but this is not one of them. My friend, I'm here to tell you that it's hard to start living your life until you first choose. And yes, you can choose. In fact, maybe we can even say that you chose by being here and watching this and listening to this today. Maybe that's the step before the step to the step. Now, it's fascinating to just mull over this for a second or two of why is this lack of purpose common? Why is it more common for somebody in this world to not have purpose than to be on purpose and to be in purpose? It's a fascinating study. It really gives insight. And here are some of the reasons I think that people are out of purpose most of the time, most of the people is, first of all, you're not taught. There's not purpose 101 in school, much less 201, 301, 401, 501. There's reading, writing, and arithmetic, but there's not reading, writing, arithmetic, and purpose. Formally or informally, most people are just simply not taught this. So it's hard to expect somebody to know something if they're not shown how. Now, some of us have had purpose at one time and we've lost our way. I've been there. I've been in and out of purpose, more probably than most. And you have to be okay with that. You have to say, listen, wherever I found myself, here I am. And if I've lost my way, that doesn't mean I can't go back. Or that doesn't mean I can't go forward towards my way, or to the left, or to the right, or above me, or below me. It means I have the opportunity to get back on the path that was meant for me. The world is very fascinating in its ability to distract. There's a lot of noise out there, and the rate of noise and information and choice is growing at an exponential rate every single day. And so it's really easy to get buried underneath the mundane and the minutia. And so you deprioritize it because, if your house is on fire, you don't say, well, hold on a second, let me figure out my purpose first. You try to put the house out. But if every day you wake up to a house that's on fire, it's going to be challenging. Yet nonetheless, we still got to set some time aside and reprioritize. And it's a really simple thing. Is what your choice is doing right now serving you? If they are, fantastic, keep it up. But if there's room for improvement, that means we need to reprioritize something or other. And you're trying perhaps, but your approach is off. And that's okay. I love that when that happens, because each adjustment brings you one step closer to what you're seeking. And here's the biggie, though. This is why I left this one for last. At the heart of it, really, this is the big thing that holds people back, is you're afraid of coming up short. What happens if you go out and audaciously reach for something and somehow, some way don't grasp it? You miss it. Well, I will say congratulations to you, because seeking that purpose and living in it, that's the beauty of the prosperity, not where it takes you at the end, but where you are as you go through the journey. And that is noble, my friend, and that is beautiful. And I would love for you to experience that, which is one of the reasons why we make this session number 1 of Prosperity Algorithm. We get your purpose aligned, so then everything else serves that. So this is the foundation of prosperity, is having that purpose. And if this makes sense to you and you would like some additional help with that and some insights and some exercises, because I've developed some exercises around this, multiple ones, because, there's not a one size fits all to purpose on this. You can go to the URL that's on your screen right now. Check out the special deal that I've set up for you. And if it makes sense for you, go ahead, enroll, and get started in the Prosperity Algorithm. That's the very first session that will be unlocked for you of the 10 sessions. Now, the second session and what we focus on in Prosperity Algorithm is the structure of freedom. And I love the concept of this, because it seems paradoxical, doesn't it? Freedom seems to have lack of structure, where you're free and you can do anything you want. Structure seems to be the antithesis of freedom, but the reality is this is more yin and yang than it is opposites. But people struggle with this. They're either overly structured or they have a lack of structure. And here's the thing that a lot of people aren't aware of. What you do on a daily basis in your life is your structure. And sadly, most people are slaves to structures that don't serve them. John Steinbeck, the famous author, Grapes of Wrath, that guy, right? He said, it's a hard thing to leave any deeply routine life, even if you hate it. And that's the importance of structure, because structure is so powerful, it will override willpower every day of the week. It grinds the dust of determination and motivation. It laughs at them. They are gnats and flies biting at the nape of structure. Through structure, we achieve freedom. Structure is the key to freedom. And so we have to replace routine right now with an even greater routine that renders the existing routine inert. Now, here's another reason why I am very keen on making this right now one of the focuses of Prosperity Algorithm, is because in this world we live in, the information and choice have increased exponentially. So for about 50,000 years, human beings had a very limited number of choices. And not even 50,000 years ago. Let's go back to the 1950s. How many television channels did you have to choose from? Not a lot, right? How many newspapers did you have to choose from? Not very many. When you went out to get coffee, how many different flavors of coffee did you have to pick from? Probably one. It's a whole Model T Ford. It's any color you want as long as it's black. But flash forward today, in the morning when you go and get your Starbucks, 170,000 different drink combinations just for Starbucks. We now have more streaming services on which we could watch television than we used to have television channels. And so for 50,000 years, the brain is kind of developed at the pace it develops, but the world has developed at a much greater pace in terms of information and choice. So our capacity to process these choices and all of this information, we're on outdated hardware. We're still connecting to the internet on a 14.4K modem, if the internet is the world, and us connecting is our brain. And so more than ever, we need a way to filter out all this noise. Would you agree with me that the world is getting noisier and noisier on a day-by-day basis? I would say even a minute-by-minute basis. More choice than ever, yet more misery than ever, more suffering than ever. There's a chart that shows you as choice goes up in the world, anxiety increases in the world. As choice goes up in the world, depression increases, substance abuse increases, addiction increases, because it's overwhelming. And if you can't cope with it, then you get broken down. And so structure allows us to automatically filter out all that non-essential noise, all that non-essential choice, all that overwhelm. And then it becomes really easy. Then it becomes pretty natural to float through life because nature's never busy, yet it gets everything done it needs to get done. Now, the benefits of a prosperous structure looks like this. First of all, having structure builds confidence. Because once you know what can happen on a day-by-day basis, once that intention is out there, you start it out and then you will improve. And then that improvement will create confidence. That's one of the ways, not the only way, but it's awesome when that happens. You start feeling better. And when you start feeling better, you start doing better. I've already kind of touched upon this, but it reduces the need for willpower and determination. Now, willpower and determination are in my toolbox of tools that I can reach for to help me accomplish things, to help me to get where I want to go, achievement, success, all that kind of stuff. I have willpower and determination in the toolbox, but they very rarely get used because they're not very good tools most of the time for most things. They don't really work very well. And they are, for me, a last resort. Most people, they put too much emphasis on willpower and determination. But again, I can just show you, like, you do things that you don't want to do, and the structure forces and compels you to do them. Willpower and determination be damned. And so there's a higher order here to get what you really want. It has very little to do with willpower and determination. Now, there are some unbelievable souls out there who can hate themselves enough to force themselves to continually do things that are hard. I don't know if I'd call that a success or not. So I want structure to serve me to prosperity. And then if willpower shows up, great. If it doesn't, great. It doesn't matter. And so this is what I would love to teach to you. It's something most people don't really tap into when it comes to the prosperity, but structure allows for this. Structure creates momentum. And Newton said it best in his laws of motions. He says an object at motion stays in motion. And that's what we want. But an object at rest stays at rest. So building some structures. I have some wonderful, easy structures that we break down inside a prosperity algorithm. Structures around eating, because that's really important. That's a key part of feeling good inside. So you're feeling good with the outside world. We have structure around sleeping, because without proper, healthy sleep hygiene, it's almost impossible to be prosperous. And so I've identified certain areas of life that are constants, that if they're bad, everything else falls apart. And then built some very basic structures around to help you then color in those lines and paint your own pictures. And then once we get the structure in place, it will create momentum. The structures are super simple. They're super easy, because if they're very big and massive, most people won't start, and then they won't get the momentum. And the reality is this: structure enhances spontaneity and creativity. It doesn't decrease. So some people are resistant to putting structure around their lives because they're afraid that it will limit them in what they're able to do. I'm a musician, kind of. I'm more of a music enthusiast. And I like to think of jazz musicians. They are known to create some of the most spontaneous improvisational music. But the music theory of the scale and the key that they're in is more in-depth and more complicated and more structured and mathematical and precise than just about any other music that exists. So the most spontaneous music, the most free-flowing music has the most structure underneath it. Fascinating. And what I love about this is it gives you a future to look forward to. So most of us, we look at the present through the past of what we couldn't do or what we tried to do, but we're dragged down from the past. But we don't have something compelling to pull us towards our dreams. So instead, we're pushed by our fears. So let's create the structure for you that will pull you like a magnet towards your dreams, as opposed to right now, the fear of the past pushing you forward to try to get away from it. Prosperity Algorithm Session 2, we talk about this in depth. I give you the exercises. I give you the foundation of where to help you uncover your own mini structures that you can develop, which will then support you in your quest to prosperity. And if that sounds good to you, go to that URL on your screen right now, type it into your favorite browser, sign up. I got that special webinar pricing. I'm not revealing it here because it's a really big discount, and I want you to be surprised when you see it. That's session 2. What about session 3? Adaptivity and flexibility. Oh my gosh, you ever heard the saying that if you want to make God laugh, show him your plans? The only thing I am certain of is uncertainty, that things, the only constant is constant change. And if we can't adapt and be flexible, we're toast, we're done. Now, people talk about comfort zones, and they'll even say things like expand your comfort zone. And that's really popular, but I would suggest that it's a very limiting way of looking at it. Because what can you do with a zone? You can stretch it, maybe widen it, maybe break through it and then reset it. But what's that doing? That's incrementally, that's moving the needle a little bit, right? But what else could you do? If it wasn't a zone, but it was deeper than that, more powerful, more enriching than that, how could you manipulate it? Okay. My point is this: thinking about it as a comfort zone is too comfortable. Isn't that interesting? Because you can flip comfort inside out. You can become more uncomfortable with procrastination than action. You can become more fearful of failing than you succeed automatically. That's examples of flipping it. So the way I actually think of prosperity when it relates to comfort and adaptivity and flexibility is this. Are you familiar with what a tesseract is? Most people are not. So a tesseract is a multi-dimensional structure, 4D or greater in this particular instance. And a lot of people are not even aware of this geometrical concept. But when I think of comfort, this is what I'm thinking of how things instantly change and how they're fluid and how they can move and they can flip inside out. So you know how the cube is to the square? Well, the tesseract is a cube to the cube. It's the cube cubed, so to speak. Does that sound complicated? It absolutely is. But my point of this is when we think about how we can adjust and be flexible and change, we are two-dimensional. And no wonder it's hard for us to be flexible. It's hard for us to be adaptive. It's easy for us to get stuck in a rut. And the only difference between a rut and a grave is a couple of feet. And so we have to have flexibility. So we have to be okay with a little bit of uncertainty or a lot of uncertainty. We have to tolerate uncertainty in our quest to prosperity. See, the problem with certainty is it doesn't actually exist. It doesn't. So if you want to seek out certainty, you must do so at the expense of openness, of curiosity, of acceptance, of learning and growth. And we talk about these states. These states facilitate flexibility and adaptability and really lead your way to prosperity. Because if you're curious, then you approach it saying, what's going to happen? But if you're afraid, you're going to approach it with, oh my God, what if I fail? And you can be curious. Every child is born curious. We can reclaim that and we can recover that. And so I would rather live with uncertainty and being curious to see what would happen than try to seek this false construct of certainty. And then when it inevitably doesn't go my way, which it will eventually, for most of us, it goes against us a lot, right? Then I'm not completely out of the game anymore. Inflexibility is the commonality of all trauma. So inflexibility says something happens to me that triggers me, and I either fight, flight, freeze, or you can do fawn. That's the fourth one that they've added to it. So it took them a while. First, it was fight or flight, right? 20 years go by, and they say, well, hold on, maybe there's more than two options. Maybe there's three. And then freeze came up. And then about 20, 30 more years goes by, and they said, okay, wait, hold on. There might have been a fourth one, fawn now, which is where you just do whatever you can to please somebody else. But the reality is it's still only 4 options. It's inflexible. You are pretty much given up control of really shaping your destiny at that point. So if you want to thrive, be in prosperity, you need more options. You need the ability to do more than just fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? For example, ask for help. It's something that doesn't come very naturally to most of us when we're in these very intense situations, but it can be practiced and it can be accessed and it can be taught and it can be put out there as an opportunity for you to not get stuck in the same patterns over and over again. Because what happens is you really ultimately try to avoid even getting into this fight, flight, freeze, or fawn situation. So complete avoidance becomes the name of the game. And what happens there? You now suffer the disease of indecision, as I like to call it. Most people have trouble making their minds up, even on the restaurants that they want to go to when they want to go out to eat, or they have trouble deciding what movie they want to watch as a family or when they're out with friends. And those are nickel and dime decisions. They're not really that important in the grand scheme of things. And so imagining making decisions at a higher level than that, and we're faced with thousands and thousands and thousands of decisions every single day. And most of us don't want to make a clear decision, because with making a decision comes accountability. It comes drawing a line in the sand and closing yourself off from certain other options. And most people would rather die than do that. And the real big deal here is the pressure of, what if I make the wrong decision? And for most people that are locked out of prosperity right now, the number one commonality amongst them that I've seen is that fear of making the wrong decision. And so we really stress this in the prosperity algorithm is this: if you actually analyze this, you're going to discover almost all of the decisions you make on a day-to-day basis are not right or wrong. It's a binary choice. It's not that at all, but most people think it's that, right? Mostly they're not right and wrong decisions. They're usually just decisions which need to be made. Simple as that. And so I want you to think about some decisions that you have been mulling over far too long, that have been taking up unnecessarily cycles of thought and energy in your head, in your brain, and they're making your heart heavy because they're not allowing more space for other things to go in there, because you're carrying around all this junk that needs to just be decided on. And there is no right or wrong, and there's just decisions that need to be made. So the only wrong here is not making the decision. And oftentimes decisions are made right as opposed to initially making the right decisions, so to speak. And if that jives with you, I would love for you to make the decision of, yes, I want in the prosperity algorithm. And if you have decided, yes, I do want in, then you go to that URL that's on your screen right now, and you will see the special pricing, limited time pricing, because it's a special deal. So if it was always available, it wouldn't be special. And I want you to get in on this. Now, just, sillily, I try to put up some numbers of the value of each of these sessions. The reason it's $3,125 is that is what I charge an hour. I know it sounds like a ridiculous amount of money, and it is per hour of my time, but in the business world, people happily pay me that. And these sessions generally go a little over the hour. And they were done initially with a live group of students. And so I usually take another hour to answer questions specifically and do teaching and modeling and coaching. And those are just as valuable as the formal structure of the sessions as well. We're only 3 in, though. I got a couple more I want to break down for you here today. Tenacious persistence is next. This is number 4, session 4 of Prosperity Algorithm. And my goal is to have you, when you're done with this session, have the following mindset when it comes to obstacles. And it's this: when you encounter a challenge, you say, I'll go over it. I will go under it. I will go through it. I'll pick the lock on it. If I have to, I will drip sweat on it until it erodes. Now, question to you. If you had such a mindset when it came to challenges and obstacles, right? How successful do you think you would be? Answer: very. And I've had that playing on a loop in my head for years now, where I just say, all right, you decided to show up. You picked the wrong day. I know you're used to slowing people down and stopping them, but you picked the wrong guy to do that with me. Because I will find a way to put you inert, to make you a non-issue anymore. And I just have that attitude where my problems end up fearing me more than I fear my problems, because it's an attitude. Now, Is that something I'm born with or something that you either have or you don't? No, it's a state, and you can install it just like you can install a computer program. And I break down the methodology of how to install that. But if you want to skip the course and you want to do it for free, you simply would have to just install it yourself manually by working through the tonality of how you express it to yourself and setting yourself up into situations initially that could really augment that. That's the brute force way. Most people don't even do that, so you're ahead of them. I have a more elegant way. It takes a little bit of setup and time in the session to break it down for you. But one way or another, I want you to have that voice in your head that says, I got this. And that my dreams will propel me far more than any challenge or any stub toe ever could. Your obstacles start to look this small compared to the light that's shining on you of your purpose and your greater destiny. It's not that they don't exist, and it's not that they won't humble you from time to time, because they certainly will. But you'll say, oh, you're one of those. I know what to do with that. Now, here's an interesting insight and conclusion that I've come to that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about. I think it's a finer lesson inside of the concept of persistence, is where I've deeply studied those that are persistence and built the models around persistence. I've discovered it's very hard to find persistence without also compassion. They go hand in hand. They are beautiful. If one's salt, then the other one's pepper, right? If one's peanut butter, the other one's jelly. Persistence and compassion. And I'm going to take it a step further, is the first type of compassion that is worth pursuing. It's self-compassion. It is a travesty to me to see that the endangerment of self-compassion, it's an endangered species, if you will, is those that have proper self-compassion. I don't know if it's a societal issue that's just run us free of that, or if we're just too stressed out. Self-compassion is such a vital skill. If you have that, then persistence seems to automatically occur. And let me put it to you this way. If you feel worthy of the endeavor, then the task is already half finished. I work with a lot of people on the wealth side of things, because making money is the easiest thing that I could teach you to do. I would rather make you happy and then maybe make money on the side, right? Usually if you make you happy, making money becomes even easier, right? But a lot of people that want to become a millionaire, they want it, but they don't feel worthy of it. And so if I teach tactics and techniques and strategies on making $1 million, deep inside they feel they're not worthy of it, they're probably going to lose. They will self-sabotage most of the cases, and they won't even realize it. It's like driving a vehicle with one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake. No wonder it's so hard. And no matter how much willpower you put to smash that gas pedal down, if you have another foot on the brake, it's still not going to serve you. So how do you feel worthy of your endeavors? How do you claim that and own that? Well, we do that in Prosperity Algorithm. We have that. There's a whole lesson on self-compassion and then how that relates and interacts with persistence. See, self-compassion is the solve, if you will, or the balm or the medicine, the medication for the wounds that will occur when trauma happens, when setbacks occur, or unexpected bumps in the road. And unexpected bumps in the road is a polite way of putting it. I'm talking sometimes just absolutely devastating tragedy when it occurs. And I've had my share. And in fact, I do a whole breakdown in relationship to overcoming adversity. And I don't use that term, overcoming adversity. I say that because I'm sure you've heard it before. To me, I look at adversity as alchemy. I turn adversity into alchemy. But I've had my share of tragedies, probably more so than most people. And it's still self-compassion that heals those wounds that are created by tragedy, which are some of the deepest, darkest, most debilitating wounds that you could ever have. Now, most people, they have no healing plan, so they get crushed. They expect things to should go their way. And when it doesn't, because inevitably won't, and they don't have a plan to heal, they don't have a plan to say, oh, you're a setback. All right, I prepared for you, right? And they get crushed. And some of them never get back up on their feet again. And boy, I don't want that. I do not want that for you. Okay. So we're going to heal those wounds and setbacks with self-compassion. The thing about fear is I don't try to get rid of fear. And fear is the biggest thing that will hold you back if you let it. What I've discovered is most effective is allowing fear to come around for the ride, but not drive anymore. Put fear in the passenger seat. So fear can show up and we can acknowledge, yes, I'm scared. And I'm even frightened right now. And I can accept that. I don't have to judge myself, and I certainly don't judge you. Don't ever think lesser of yourself because you have fear. Don't ever beat yourself up because you're scared. I know that that's not the culture that we've developed, where the culture is, I'm so tough that I'm just going to do it anyway, and I can't be afraid, and somehow if I'm afraid, I'm weak. That's nonsense. All right, I'm going to put that to bed right now because that will create suffering and trauma in you. You say to yourself, I am afraid and I am scared, and I'm going to take that with me as I go through my journey of prosperity. I'm not going to try to avoid it. I'm not going to try to hide from it. I'm not going to try to pretend it doesn't exist. I'm just not going to let it drive. I'm not going to give it the keys, right? I'm going to tell it to put its seatbelt on because it's coming with me. This is called accepting reality. If you want to be prosperous, you must accept reality. The more you can accept of it, the better you're going to do. So try to pretend you're not afraid when you're afraid. That is denying reality. And you will deny prosperity. And so this compassion, once you have it, you can accept fear and you can use fear because fear is one of the most powerful energetic forces that exist. Why would we want to deny it? We can leverage it. We'll talk more about leverage here in a second, but here's an irrefutable fact. Anyone listening right now to this webinar is incredibly persistent. If your heart beats an average of 60 beats per minute, and I don't know if that's true or not, right? And you could actually say, hey, if I'm 60 years old right now, do the math. How many minutes have you lived your life? And then times that by 60, because that's how many times your heart's beat at least. And that number is gargantuan. It's huge. And you haven't missed enough beats yet to stop it from beating. What to speak of the millions of ways that you could have died by now. There's a lot of ways you can die. But your stubborn heart just kept beating. That is persistence. You have persistence all over you. You just don't acknowledge it. That's denying reality, right? As a baby, and you were a baby at one time, right? You were a baby that was so helpless. You had to be watched around the clock. Somebody had to change your dirty diapers for you. And you certainly couldn't speak. Yet you learned how to say a word or a syllable, and then another one, and then connect them together. And one word became a phrase, and a phrase became a sentence, and a sentence became a paragraph. And pretty soon you started expressing abstract thoughts. And you created this complicated language that you communicate with. And you did it without a manual. You did it without a formal tutor. And why did you do it? Because you wanted to. That's why. That's persistence. That's in you already. I'm just going to help you get in touch with that again. And then we're going to magnify it. We're going to electrify it. Pretty soon, if I've done my job right in the prosperity algorithm, when we hear sky's the limit, we think, hardly. The sky's a good place to start. And I want you to experience that. And part of experiencing that is going through prosperity algorithm. In the start is here on this URL. Go ahead and plug it into your browser, put it in and type it into that URL bar, go there, see the special deal, see the countdown timer, because it is a special deal. It's not going to last forever. And if it makes sense to you, I want you in there. If you want to be in there, let's hook it up. Join Prosperity Algorithm. Let's see what happens. Now let's talk a little bit about adversity, shall we? Whew. Einstein, arguably one of the smartest men that ever graced us, said adversity introduces a man to himself. What better way to be introduced to yourself? Adversity will show you truly who you are. The good and the bad. It doesn't discriminate. So the question is, how do we turn stumbling blocks into stepping stones? And I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I'm going to break it down a little bit more. Here's the best way to handle adversity is to ask for help. Now, unfortunately, most of us, we're not very good at asking for help, not in a prosperous way, right? The challenge is sometimes we ask for help from people that, whether they try to or not, end up hurting us because they are also hurt. So it's hard to heal the world when you have broken hands, right? But the other challenge with this is many of us just don't feel comfortable asking for help either. We don't know how to ask for it. So we may ask for it in a way that's not going to help us. And I'm one of the worst. I was one of the absolute worst at asking for help. I had this attitude that if it was meant to be, then it was up to me. And I'll tell you, that led me to devastation, not to prosperity. And then one day I sat down and said, listen, I need help. So I did what I always do. I studied it. That's just how my brain works. And I went and I said, I'm going to develop strategic models. I'm going to follow and observe and read formal and also informal educate myself on models of asking for help. And I'm going to document those. I'm going to test them out like a scientist. I'm going to try different things. I'm going to see what works, see what needs fine tuning. And then I'm going to step into it, live it, and then report it to others. So I've created what's called a help swipe file, where every time I've seen somebody who's asked for help and when I feel is a prosperous way, I make a note. And now I have hundreds of ways in which I can ask for help. And what I discovered is people love helping when you do it in the right way. And I was denying people this wonderful gift of helping and supporting, which most people want to do if you set it up properly. And without it, you can't get past adversity. Now, here's the thing about adversity too, and this is the other component of it that we really take a deep look at, is there's always a manufactured component to it. No matter what's happened to you, the story you attach to it can make it even worse than what it is. So there's always some component, and I say this with all of care and love and empathy for you and what you've went through. There's always a part of adversity that you have that's imagined, that's only there because you added to it or you created it. And sometimes all of it's imagined. And I've had so-called adversities in my life that were all created by me. I was the culprit of my own adversity. And I wasn't aware of the stories that I was attaching to things instead of accepting them, in the way that I was handling them and messing around with them, right? And I said, oh my gosh, I got to figure this out. And so the victim state is an absolutely acceptable state for anyone to live in if they choose to, but it's not the only state. Learned helplessness is a state. And sometimes that's all you have, but it's not the only option. It's not the only state. And for most of us, if we've had bad stuff happen to us, it's probably happened to us one time, or maybe even several times, unfortunately, prolonged. Maybe somebody was abusive to us and it happened to us over and over again. But it usually still pales in comparison to how many times it's happened in your mind, where you ran it back. And oftentimes when you run it back, you add stuff on top of it, such as, what's wrong with me that somebody would do that to me? What is so bad about me that this would occur? And that's the imagined part I'm talking about. That's building a story around something that happened to try to fathom it. And that's challenging. Obviously, we want to ask for help, but we also want to have other options on how to deal with challenging things in our life, adversities, setbacks that no human being should have to suffer, but unfortunately you have suffered. And so we break that down and we turn adversity into alchemy. We have to, because adversity will increase with wealth. The great philosopher, notorious B.I.G., Biggie Smalls, he said, "Mo money, mo problems." Well said. Absolutely. So if you want more of anything in your life, you will also get with it more adversity, not less. A lot of people don't want to tell you about that because they got something else to sell you, right? But the idea here is your adversity will increase when you increase something. And if you don't have a mechanism to leverage that adversity, then the more successful you are, the more challenging your life will be. And I think that's missing from a lot of this self-help, personal development stuff. They teach you how to be successful on the outside at the expense of feeling prosperous and whole on the inside, because there's a lot of virtues in adversity. If you really sit down and take a look at this, is every time you encounter adversity, it allows you to exercise courage. Courage. What a beautiful experience. And every time you have an opportunity to be courageous. Whether you end up doing it or not, doesn't matter. You have a choice. You have an option. Isn't that exciting? Maybe we can do it next time. Okay. Adversity develops character. Character, right? How do certain people become certain personalities and have certain attractive qualities and traits that we aspire to? They got them through adversity. That's how it happened. We will develop character through adversity as long as we allow ourselves to. That's the refinement of this, right? We allow ourselves to, then we can. But if we're so overwhelmed by the adversity or we take it too hard, we don't allow that growth and that development to occur. For me, what was a big game changer is it provided a chance for me to heal. I said, oh, okay, this is tough. Now I have an opportunity to see if I can heal. Let me try it out. And that's how I got really good at dealing with some of the traumas in my life and really getting good at healing from them and growing from them. And so now adversity occurs. Not all the time. Nobody's perfect at this, but more often than not, I'll say, oh, okay, here's adversity. No matter what happens to me, I'll have a chance to be courageous. I'll have a chance to work on my character, and I'll have a chance to improve my ability to heal. And then I can grow even more when I heal. And that presents that opportunity for growth. And what has led me down the path to where I am connected to you today, isn't that crazy? Out of the 7 billion plus people in the world, somehow your path and my path have crossed here. But that wouldn't have happened if I didn't have adversity. Because if I didn't have adversity, I wouldn't have become a monk. True story. Talk a little bit more about that in Prosperity Algorithm. But I was a Hare Krishna and hip hop monk from Muscatine, Iowa. And through being a monk and getting back into music and making it a purpose for a while for me, I discovered the business of music and consumer psychology, which actually got me more interested than what the music was offering to me. So you went from monk to music to marketer. And now here I am in front of you today, where I was able to build a business and get into that. So without adversity, our paths would have never crossed. And my life would not be the way that it was if I didn't have the ability to turn adversity into alchemy. And I would love for you, no matter what the adversity is, big or small, to have the opportunity to at least try it out and see what happens. In Prosperity Algorithm, we break this down. Go to the URL on your screen. Just go ahead and sign up. You'll get access. It's a digital membership. All 10 sessions are going to be there. And you'll be able to get them as it makes sense. They'll be there available to you to go through. You can watch them as many times as you wish to. We treat this like a buffet. And what I mean by that is take a little bit of each session or take 5% of a session. For most people that have been really impacted positively by Prosperity Algorithm, they just find 1 or 2 things in a session and that's it. And then they can come back later and get more. And you can as well. So go ahead and get signed up. Go to that URL on your screen. It is a special deal. It doesn't last forever. So get while the getting is good. Now let's talk about leverage. This is really interesting to me because while some of these other concepts that we talked about here today are pretty high level, we certainly do our best to break them down in Prosperity Algorithm. But strategic leverage to me is pretty boots on floor, ground level, very tactical, which I like. So let's define what I mean by strategic leverage. It means getting more out of what you already have. And you have a lot more than you think. So generally, when people have a problem or where they have a desire for something, they go and they seek out and acquire things. So they feel like I'm lacking, so therefore I need to go get something. And that misses the best thing you already have, which is you. It de-emphasizes that. And so before you should seek outside of yourself, you should take stock of what you do have. And again, you have more than you think. And so these are some interesting examples to prove my point here, is because you hear these phrases all the time and they're nonsense. And it frustrates me how they're accepted as common sense when they're nonsense. People will say things all the time like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And I say phooey to that. You can lead a horse to water and you can make him drink. Veterinarians have to do this to save horses' lives. If a horse is not drinking water, he will die. So what do? They give him salt. Salt will make him thirsty. Maybe he'll drink then. They sweeten it a little bit. They put some apple juice in the water. That has been proven to work very effectively. Sometimes it's the water's too cold. Yeah, have you ever tried to drink water that's too cold? It's not very pleasant. Warm it up a little bit, right? That's leverage. That's leverage. If there's anything I can give you and immediately up level your life, it's strategic leverage. This is what has made me a multimillionaire more than anything, is finding the untapped potential and value in something that everybody else is overlooking. And it's obvious. People say, oh my gosh, this is really hard, Jason. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. And I said, give me a metal detector or a strong magnet and I will give you that needle. I mean, posturous, right? But people are just like, the first thing ain't coming to mind that's working for me, so I'm just going to give up or whatever. And I'm like, what can we use? What can we leverage? What's an opportunity here that everybody else is overlooking? And oftentimes, because some people think I'm really a good salesperson, so I just agree with them. And they'll say to me, Jason, you can sell ice to Eskimos. And I look at them like, yeah, of course I could. What do you think they make igloos out of? Ice, right? If somebody needed an emergency igloo and I came along with an ice truck, thank God, right? This is just leverage. One of my all-time favorite quotes is by the genius Archimedes. Archimedes, one of the greatest thinkers of all time, said, give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world. Now, he was not a motivational speaker. He meant that in a mathematical, geometrical sense. He meant that quite literally. They broke out the math and the calculators for that one, right? And it works on a physical level, but it also works on a spiritual level. Give me a lever long enough and I shall move the world. Leverage, strategic leverage, easiest way to immediately up-level your life, the quality of it. And I am a strategist. That's where I make most of my money, is seeing what most people can't see. And here's something that I will absolutely love for you to learn, if nothing else. Take this with you. Every disadvantage has within it an equal or greater advantage. It is a fact. Most people don't see this, but it is 100% of the time. And I rarely speak with such generalizations where I say 100% of the time, because that almost never is the case. But this is the case. Every advantage has a disadvantage and every disadvantage has an advantage. And so if somebody says, Jason, I'm brand new, I don't have any experience, fantastic. Fresh. You got a fresh canvas in which we can paint on. That's exciting to me, right? And so they think their lack of experience is a limitation. And I look at that as an awesome opportunity. Then somebody else says, well, Jason, I'm an old dog, and I heard you can't teach old dog new tricks. And I say, wanna bet? I have a couple of old dogs that we rescued, and I taught them many new tricks, and I still teach them new tricks, right? So old dogs have wisdom. We can leverage wisdom. Doesn't matter to me, right? No matter what has happened. You say, Jason, I fell 1,000 times. Fantastic. Because you keep going at it. You didn't quit. an attitude. I can do a lot with that attitude. That's good. So, small companies are agile. Big companies have processes and operations. One is not better than the other. They are just different. Every disadvantage that you have in your life or that you think you have in your life has within it a seed of greater advantage if properly cultivated. You have fear, we can use it. Fear's powerful. You get distracted easily, fantastic. Let's get distracted by the beauties and marvels in the world, and then more of them will show up. You say, I procrastinate. Fantastic. Let's take that procrastination and let's point it at your limiting behaviors so you can get around to being limiting towards yourself later on. And you can keep putting it off, right? Procrastination is an incredibly useful thing if properly leveraged. The single greatest lever is perspective shift. And I've never really seen anybody else teach this. It is my go-to. I've used this already dozens of times, probably in this very webinar on you. Hopefully you pick up on it. I use it on myself even more because I want to benefit from it more than anybody. And the perspective shift is what I've discovered is that absolutely your feelings towards something change if you change the perspective in which you view it. So I do a massive breakdown of all the useful perspective shift techniques that I've developed over the years. And so oftentimes when people encounter a problem, they look at it as, here's a problem, what do I need to do next to move forward? So they look at the problem through the perspective of present time. And one of the ways, not the only way, but one of the ways I say, I look at the problem as already solved and I look at it backwards. And it's amazing how much leverage you can get out of that. Or like I do it with clients all the time. They say, Jason, I have this problem. I say, well, what's the problem you're going to have after this problem is solved? And they all stare back at me blank and dumbfounded at first. So, what do you mean? I go, yeah, once we solve this problem, what's the next problem you're going to face? And the reason why it's so hard for them to understand that at first is because they can't look past the problem. Well, guess what happens when you can't look past the problem? You don't go anywhere. You're screwed, right? So this is a simple perspective shift. It's one of many simply just given to you where we change the perspective of time. As opposed to here, moving forward, we say forward, moving backwards. So that's one perspective shift. Another one is seeing it through the eyes of a child. There are so many different tests that they have shown where children are more creative problem solvers than adults because they will consider things that adults will easily, quickly discard that are really super creative. And so oftentimes if I'm dealing with a problem, I'll say, how would a 6-year-old go about solving this problem? And so just having a different perspective gives you more choice, gives you more options, gives you more leverage. And that can be enough. Most people always talk about adding things. I always like to start with taking things away because it's easier to remove than it is to add. It's easier to delete than it is to create, right? So negation is what can be removed, not what can be added. And so oftentimes people will say, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. So you know what they do? They add to their list of tasks to try to overcome overwhelm. They say, I need to go to the overwhelm seminar. Now you have another thing to be overwhelmed about. No wonder it's so hard, right? So you say, if I'm overwhelmed, what are some things I can immediately, completely remove from my life? And just accept them and be happy that they were part of my life. Thank them for being part of my experience, but they're no longer needed. So negation, what can be removed, not what can be added. You can make anything feel insignificant, by the way. So there are, people that are like, oh, Jason, $1 million is a lot of money. Is it? Because there are 7.8 billion people plus on this planet, and there's more every single day. And you're telling me you can't find 1,000 of them to spend $1,000 with you in some way, shape, or form? Congratulations. That's $1 million. 1,000 times 1,000 is $1 million. Doesn't seem like that much now, right? Think about it this way. The sun is 93 million miles away from the earth, yet it gives us all the nourishment we need at that great of distance. And yet we are connected together. Some of us so close together that we could touch each other and reach out. So how hard can that be? Well, in comparison, it doesn't seem like that much now, does it? So if you wish to, and it's a trick, that's all that it is, but it's a useful strategic leverage, is we can compare anything to anything else and we can find an appropriate comparison that will empower us. And that is how we move towards prosperity. Leverage is that immediately level up to start the momentum of the prosperity algorithm. It's one of my favorite sessions that I teach. And one of the reasons why is because you'd never seen anything like it before. Some of this other stuff, you will see similar versions of it in other programs, maybe a little bit, but this is pretty much brand new. This is my business strategist hat generalized to prosperity, which is even more valuable there. And that's session number 6. Now, I'm only going to have time on this training here to give you a sample of the last 2 sessions, and then we will leave marketable expertise and perfect imperfection for those of you who say yes and get signed up at that URL for prosperity algorithm. But let's talk about unfairness. And I love this topic. Oh my God. And there's so much to this. So a lot of people, they walk around carrying these great injustices on their shoulders. And just look at social media and all this outcry and all this fighting and all of this polarization, this us versus them mentality where everybody's at each other's throats and all that kind of stuff. It all stems on this concept of unfairness. And I like, the phrase that I think of as righteous indignation. It's one of the best ways to describe the culture wars that are happening right now all around us, is this righteous indignation. So a lot of people, when they become just so upset at unfairness, they respond one of 2 ways. They either become really sad and then they just kind of give up, or they become very angry and they want to fight it. So I would become angry. I used to think of all these injustices in the world, and I would get upset. I would get mad at God, right? That's how upset I would get. Like, why would God do this? And then, sometimes it would be useful to me. I'd get all worked up and then I'd want to go and do something. And then I would even justify it. And I'd say, listen, see, it's good for me to be angry because it motivates me. Now I'm going to go out there and right some of these wrongs. But what I discovered when I really sat down and was honest with myself was I have never found a situation where anger was the most empowering state for achieving prosperity. Not one single time. You ever make somebody love you through anger, through hate? Has that ever created love? I don't think so, right? So whenever I've employed more empowering states, I've always gained more prosperity and felt better too. So whatever thing that I could say, well, anger helped me get going and gave me this energy, it really kind of focused me in. I could find a better state that would do that as well and do other things that anger couldn't do and not limit me in other ways that anger limited me. If you have this burden of unfairness, you're carrying this weight on your shoulders and it will inevitably cause you to fall. The world is unfair. It's been unfair forever, and it will continue to be unfair forever. And there's probably not much that's going to change the overall scales of balance of unfairness. It's just one of those things. It's something that just has to be, you are there. I have to accept you, because if I fight you, I will only lose that battle every single time. So I want you to consider this, because this is an insidious little rascal that holds people back a lot more than they give it credit for. Because this is that concept of that victim, of unfair, like something happened to you that shouldn't have. And you're right, it shouldn't have, but it did, unfortunately. And so if we dwell on this unfairness of what has happened to us, or this injustice, or how we should have got a better deal than we got, or how we were not treated in the way we should have been treated. Anytime you're using should and could and would, those are great clues that you're living in that feeling of unfairness. Well, it should have went that way. It should have, but it didn't. Well, I could have done that, but it didn't happen, right? So say you only spend 10 minutes a day feeling like a victim to this unfairness. Now, the average lifespan is 78 years. So that's 60 years of adulthood. So if we said 10 minutes a day over a 60-year period of time, you know what that adds up to? That adds up to a solid 152 days of your life that you lived, living purely in this victim state of unfairness. And that breaks my heart. I love you. And I don't think any less of you for living in that victim state. I will accept you for who you are, but it still hurts, especially if there's something I could have done to help you break some of that. So maybe it's not 152 days. So you want to get upset about unfairness? Let's get upset about that. That is unfair. That is more unfair than just about anything, because you're being unfair to yourself. The world's already unfair enough. Don't help it out. Don't be even more unfair than the thing that you're mad at being unfair about. And if we go the full distance of what's fair and what isn't fair, imagine how boring life would be if it was fair. Because what does fair mean? Equal, where everything is the same for everyone? Is fair meaning that if this happens, then that has to be balanced? And how do we balance all that out, right? How mundane would things have to be to keep things in perfect order? And so isn't it wonderful that life is completely unfair, which will allow us to enjoy whatever benefit we get from it without guilt? Because that's the other side of the fair coin, is if you feel like, well, I became rich, so therefore I have something somebody else doesn't have, that's unfair. It's true, but does that make you feel better? Does that empower you? Over 1 billion people on this planet don't have access to running water. That's unfair to them, not to you, right? And so some people have this burden, and that's a very extreme way of looking at it, but some people have this burden of unfairness on the other side. So they're upset at the things that are not fair towards them, and then they are guilty about the things that are unfair in their favor. So this will unburden you of that as well. Okay? And by the way, some of the greatest joys I've ever had in my life is where, in what little small way I could help repair some injustices that could be repaired. Most of them can't. But occasionally, sometimes you can, and you can do this without being angry, upset, or overwhelmed. Sometimes you can make things whole again. And what a wonderful feeling that is. How powerful would that be for you? Prosperity algorithm. We break this down. We get into it. We go at it. Because this is not basic get by stuff, right? This is not survive. This is thrive. Prosperity. So go ahead and go to that URL. If that makes sense to you, get signed up. You'll see the special webinar pricing there. Such a good price that I don't want to say it out loud. I want you to be surprised when you see it. It's way less than the retail price of this, which is about $1,000 and worth every penny, might I add. And you can get access to this digital membership of Prosperity Algorithm, and you can go through these sessions again and again and again. The last one that I'll leave you with here, because we've already went over past the time that I had allotted for this. But sometimes it is what it is. And let's talk about serendipity and luck, because I believe this is one of the greatest forces to help propel you to prosperity, but everybody wants to pretend it doesn't exist or minimize it, or they have a poor relationship with it. So serendipity and luck kind of goes like this. Prosperity is harder to come on if you focus just on your personal characteristics and efforts and traits. It makes prosperity harder to unlock, because the reality is there are things outside your control. If you close yourself to those things, then it's going to be hard for them to show up. But if you open yourself up to those forces, it can greatly enhance your prosperity. To put it another way, to diminish and discount luck and chance and coincidence and serendipity, to pretend they don't exist or to downplay them, is to play the game of life without a full deck of cards. And so I really study deeply. As you can see, I'm very studious. That's one of the ways that I can really feel whole in this world, is to make studies of different situations. And I was always struggling with this whole luck concept. So I studied it, and I went and I found the expert who had interviewed and worked with more so-called self-described lucky people than anybody on the planet. Dr. Wiseman is his name, right? And I studied him relentlessly because I thought if anybody knew something about this, it would be him. And when I studied him, I discovered that he ran this newspaper experiment that's fascinating. And it went like this. He took two groups of people. One group, Group A, was people who self-described as unlucky. They said, I'm not very lucky. And he put them in Group A. And then the people that said, I'm lucky, they self-reported and described themselves as lucky. He put them in Group B. So group A is the unlucky ones, group B are the lucky ones. Then both groups are given the same exact instructions for this study. And both groups are instructed to go through a newspaper and to count the number of photographs that are in the newspaper. All right? So here's what happens. As both groups are going through, looking at the photographs, counting them, keeping a track of them, a few pages in, not very far into the newspaper, there's an advert. This advertisement that says in big, bold letters, stop counting. There are 43 photos. And so either person in either group could have stopped counting there and reported, hey, listen, there's 43 photos, and that'd be the done. But if they went on, and some of them went on, some of them stopped right there, but if they went on, a few pages after that, there was another ad, another big ad, and it said, stop counting. Tell the experimenter you've seen this ad and win 150 pounds, because they were doing this in the UK. So it was about $200, right? So essentially, if they went past the first ad, they saw the second ad, and they told the experimenter they saw that they won $200. What good luck, so to speak, right? Lucky that they came in to do an experiment and walked out with $200 that they were not expecting. Here were the results of this newspaper experiment. The results were the people who described themselves as lucky were many, many times more likely to see that second advertisement and claim that $200 cash prize. Many, 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 many times more likely. The statistics vary, and I never could pin them down with certainty, but I think it was between 5 and 7 times is a very safe thing to say, that they were 5 to 7 more times likely to see that advertisement. All right. The point of that, though, is if they are more open to having unexpectedly good things happen to them, they were more aware of the opportunity of such good things happening to them. And as I mentioned, the man who conducted this experiment was Dr. Richard Wiseman, and he's worked with more people who describe themselves as lucky than anyone else on earth. And there's an interview, because I really studied this guy, right? There's an interview when he reported these findings. And a reporter, and this is a fascinating interview, at some point in time, you can see the reporter's getting exasperated and getting frustrated with Wiseman, and he keeps pressing him on this issue. And this is where it comes to a head. He says to him, but can we acknowledge that sometimes bad stuff like car accidents and natural disasters just happens? Sometimes it's purely bad, and there's nothing good about it. And this was Wiseman's reply. I love this. This was his response. He says, listen, I've never heard that from a lucky person. I've never heard a lucky person say that. Because a lucky person gets in a car accident and says, hey, listen, I might meet a new friend. You know, there's a story in there that Wiseman gives where he's like an insurance agent, or no, it was a real estate agent, ran into somebody in a car accident or got run into, became friends with that person, and later sold them a home. So was that luck or was that an accident? I don't know. It depends on the perspective. The refinement of luck is this, though. It's not just positive thinking, because I know a lot of non-prosperous positive thinkers. You probably do too. Everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. They say that as weeds overtake their garden and destroy their crops. It's going to be okay, right? No, it's not going to just be okay just by positive thinking. This doesn't also mean that the most successful people are also the luckiest. Luck is a component that can be leveraged. It's not the only one, right? Here's what it means. It means being more aware of luck as a factor. It means we can both limit the randomness of it, and even better, we can influence it. We can actually make room for luck, and therefore have more of it show up in our life. Some people, I would say most people, they don't make enough room for luck, and then they are shocked at how unlucky they are. Other people, the way that they don't make room for luck is they minimize the power of serendipity. And the problem with that is they think all of their own results are because of them. And eventually they do stuff that overextends their own capabilities. And it all comes crashing down. I've seen that happen so often because they don't acknowledge even that outside forces could play a factor in what they're doing. I embrace luck because it unburdens me from this feeling that I have to do everything and I have to control everything. And I'm open to it. and I'm ready to recognize it when it shows up. I say, thanks for coming by, Luck. You don't come by very often, so I want to treat you really nicely when you do come by. I'm going to roll out the red carpet for you. And if it gets me to prosperity and it wasn't anything I had to do, even better. So I like to think of the slope of prosperity. And the reality is you can't control when you were born or where you were born or whom you were born to. So wherever you were initially at on the chart of prosperity, that's where you started. Boom, I'm on the x-axis, right? This is where I'm starting. I can influence its trajectory. I can't influence where I started, but I can influence its trajectory. And so we do the best that we can. And if we open up luck, it helps us influence it even further. I did not talk about marketable expertise today, but it is vitally important, and so is perfect imperfection in the equation to the algorithm, which is the prosperity algorithm. And so I will leave those two for you to unwrap completely from start freshly when you join the prosperity algorithm. So joining the prosperity algorithm is really simple. You just go to the URL on your screen. It's a digital membership site that you get access to. So you sign up and you immediately will get an email, usually within seconds of signing up, that will give you information of how you can log in and view these training sessions. You can watch them whenever you want to, as however long you want to, and you get all the slides with them as well. And we run the sessions two ways. The first way is I do the training, and which takes about an hour per session, sometimes a little longer than that. And then I take another hour, and because this was done originally with a live audience, a live virtual audience on Zoom, I should say. And I will take the materials that we talked about today and anything in relationship that the audience wants to share, and I will work through it. And so you will see that there are members of Prosperity Algorithm that we work through challenges right there on the fly that were very serious, things that were limiting them, and we got leverage on them immediately. Like one that comes to mind is someone in the program had trouble driving their car down the street beyond a couple blocks or a block. And so we worked through that and got leverage almost instantaneously. It happened pretty quickly in between sessions. And then they would report back and we would check on the progress, because you got to check your work. Because my attitude is, listen, the first way that we do it might not work, but it gives me information and we'll try it again. And so I think you're going to find there's so much value both in the formal structure of the training as well as the informal capabilities that I break down for you with actual examples and case studies. I call it working without a net because I don't know what's coming in. I take it as what it is. I get excited and accept it, and we work through it and we see what we can come out. So a lot of people who've went through Prosperity Algorithm have reported that those informal sessions were just the thing for them. But I give you more than one way in which you can access the models to tap into Prosperity Algorithm. If you could only buy one thing from me for your life, this would be the thing that I'd want you to buy. Because if you have this, then all my other trainings become more valuable to you because you have both the mental aspect of it and the spiritual, as well as then the physical aspect of, any business training that I could ever provide to you. And what's more important to me is that you are the best you that you can be, the most of you, not somebody else, but I want you to be as much of you as you possibly can be. Ultimately, that's what prosperity is. You have a purpose. You have a way in which you can show up where you can be fully you. And I would like to lend some help to you and structure for you and some consideration to you to help you uncover the most you that you can possibly be. And that's the greatest gift that you can give to me or anyone else in the world. So check it out. Go to Prosperity Algorithm. If you ever need to contact us for any reason, once you go to that URL on the bottom of that page, and every single page that we publish in Rapid Crush, there's always a link to our support. And you can reach out to support. So if you need help logging into the members area, we can give you that information. If you need help accessing a video or finding something, we are more than glad to assist you. We have 24/7, 365 support. Average response time is right around an hour. I think it's just a touch under an hour. Last I checked the analytics on our support team. We are here to help you and support you on this journey, because none of us can do this alone. So together, let us go through the prosperity algorithm. Go ahead and sign up on the URL you see on the screen. You'll see the special pricing when you go to that URL. And you'll see a countdown timer, because this is a special deal. It isn't going to last forever. So you've got to get signed up right away. And I'll see you inside the prosperity algorithm. Talk soon.